Sometimes the most brilliant arguments come from the most unexpected places. So today, we're going to deconstruct a stand-up routine by comedian Xavier Lamont that builds one of the most absurd, hilarious, and, believe it or not, insightful arguments you will ever hear. It is an absolute masterclass in satirical logic.
So the whole thing kicks off with this really simple but, man, powerful idea. Lamont's basically saying that for all our so-called progress, human conflict is just a flat circle. We're stuck in this loop, right? Having the exact same arguments our ancestors did, just with shinier technology. And this sets the stage for a pretty wild historical deep dive.
To prove this point, he goes way, way back. Centuries, actually. He uses this historical analogy to create a kind of template for all human arguments. He starts off with what sounds like a pretty academic observation, and then he just completely flips it on its head.
And the example he picks, the Incan civilization. He reminds us, they were a dominant, technologically advanced society, incredible infrastructure, the whole deal. He builds them up as this peak of pre-colonial civilization. And then he introduces the one little tradition that becomes the key to his entire argument. And yeah, there it is. Lamont just delivers this line like it's a totally normal historical fact. It's shocking, it's dark, but the way he says it, so deadpan, it creates this incredible comedic tension. And just like that, this one bizarre ritual, it's the foundation for his entire satirical structure.
But he doesn't just leave it there as some shocking fact. Oh no, he actually invents two opposing political factions inside Incan society, and he creates this fictional debate that is a perfect satire of our own modern political discourse.
And this is just brilliant, right? It shows you the two poles of basically any argument that's going nowhere. On one side, you got the fundamentalists. Their only justification is, hey, this is how we've always done it. It's pure blind tradition. But then the other side, the progressive response, is so hilariously weak. They're not against the whole sacrifice thing. They just want this one tiny concession. And their final reason, that babies are too delicious to waste, is so morally bankrupt it's absolutely hilarious. So this is where it all turns. He notices something, right? The audience is laughing their heads off at the idea of throwing babies in volcanoes. But the second he brings up eating them, you can just feel the room recoil. And that discomfort, that's exactly what he was waiting for. He found the line the audience drew in the sand, and now he's going to use it to turn the whole thing back on them.
So now that he's exposed that arbitrary moral line, he pivots. He goes from making a joke about a civilization that's been dead for centuries to a direct accusation about the very people sitting in the room. And this is where we get to the real point of his entire argument.
And boom, he just drops his bombshell. He just got everybody comfortable laughing at this historical absurdity, and then he turns around and claims that we are all guilty of a way worse taboo. The shift in tone is just jarring, and it's incredibly funny. He's made a completely insane claim, and now the entire audience is hooked. They're waiting to see how in the world he could possibly defend it.
This is the question on everyone's mind, right? How could he possibly prove that? It's a totally unhinged accusation. But that's the genius of the routine. He's backed himself into this corner on purpose, and watching him try to argue his way out is the real heart of the comedy.
So how does he even try to prove it? Well, he offers these 3 pillars of evidence, and trust me, each one gets more ridiculous than the last. Let's break down his method.
Okay, so here's his roadmap. First, he's going to mess with language. Then he moves on to some really flawed logic about packaging. And finally, he wraps it all up with a real-world example of just bizarre human behavior. It's a perfect 3-act structure for a completely nonsensical argument.
Okay, so his first piece of proof, it is pure misdirection. He points at our own vocabulary and suggests that the way we talk about food has this hidden kind of Freudian confession about our cannibalistic tendencies. It's like a classic conspiracy theorist move, finding patterns that aren't really there.
And you've got to hear his examples. By just relabeling common foods, caviar becomes fish babies, eggs are chicken babies, he builds this flimsy but hilarious foundation. And throwing in baby carrots just pushes the logic into the most ridiculous territory possible. He's just playing with words to make the audience question their own reality.
All right, for his second piece of evidence, he gets into this whole labeling fallacy. He zooms in on this one strange detail from the grocery store aisle and just twists it to fit his narrative. This is where it really starts to feel like he's a detective in some parody movie, connecting all the red strings on a corkboard. And the logic he uses here is so simple but so effective. A can of corn shows corn.
A can of peas shows peas. But, as he points out, a jar of apple-flavored baby food shows a picture of the consumer, a baby. His insane conclusion? It's not food for babies, it's food made of babies. It's the perfect example of correlation doesn't equal causation, just used for the biggest possible comedic punch.
Okay, for his grand finale, his big finish, he pulls out a real, actual moment of internet weirdness and presents it as the ultimate proof. This final piece of evidence is meant to be the knockout punch that solidifies his entire insane theory.
He brings up that bizarre viral challenge. You probably remember this, right? People were throwing slices of American cheese on their babies' faces. It was weird, it was silly, but Lamont? He reframes the whole thing. It's not a prank. He says it's food prep. They're seasoning the main course.
And this is the ultimate punchline, the shocking, hilarious payoff to this whole insane argument he's built. He combines the final proof with this direct, outrageous appeal, and it creates a moment that is equal parts horrifying and hysterical. It's the perfect end to a perfectly absurd argument.
So, after all that, what was the point? I mean, obviously, the joke isn't really about cannibalism. Lamont built this entire, elaborate, nonsensical structure to make a much, much deeper point about human nature and the arguments we have every single day.
The whole routine is a Trojan horse. Yeah, he uses this absolutely absurd idea of eating babies to shine a light on the completely arbitrary moral lines we all draw in our own society. It's a brilliant commentary on hypocrisy.
And this is really the core of his technique. Think about it. The goal was to lead the audience down a path where they willingly accept one horrible idea as funny, only to recoil at another. And in that moment of whiplash, he reveals just how inconsistent and illogical our own societal taboos can be. He's not trying to win an argument, he's just holding up a mirror.
So that kind of leaves us with one final thought, right? Lamont's routine, as absurd as it is actually a really powerful tool for looking inward. It forces us to ask, what are our modern-day volcanoes? What illogical lines have we drawn? And what flawed arguments do we accept every day simply because that's the way it's always been?